Welcome to People Places Planet Pod, the official podcast of the Environmental Law Institute, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to ensure a healthy environment, prosperous economies, and vibrant communities founded on the rule of law.
Welcome to Trailblazing Tribes, Agriculture, an episode of the Environmental Law Institute's People, Places, Planet podcast. My name is Cynthia Harris, and I'm the director of ELI's Tribal Programming. Today, we're talking about agriculture, which encompasses more than just nutrition. When it comes to the 573 federally recognized tribes in the United States, agriculture represents a source of food security, an opportunity to express tribal sovereignty, drive economic development, and reclaim the cultivation of plants and animals central to a tribe's culture across generations. Many tribes are innovating in ways involving new technologies, business models, and, of course, understanding and even redefining the law. Today, we're speaking with an advocate, learning about two tribes leading the way, and picking the brain of a leading legal expert about the Farm Bill, or rather, to help us decode this behemoth piece of legislation and what the most current version means for tribes. Let's get started with our first guest, Zach Ducheneaux, Executive Director with the Intertribal Agriculture Council. The Council's membership has encompassed all federally recognized tribes and Alaska Natives since its founding in 1987. Zach, could you tell us a bit about the Intertribal Agriculture Council's mission and some of its programs?
Basically, we provide anything that an Indian producer or someone in the food sector could need. We provide assistance toward that end, whether it's financing, technical assistance with an application or a certification process, assistance in exporting a product that they've already developed. And we've also got a very significant youth leadership and professional development pipeline that we're now drawing our own new employees from. So we're trying to provide the foundation for turning ag production into food production again. That's been the challenge in Indian country probably since the allotment era, roughly. But if you'll take a look at the poverty maps for the nation on a county-by-county basis, Indian country is always the darkest color. And we've had a lot of initiatives aimed at addressing that, but we have never made a concerted effort to rebuild the food systems that helped our communities prosper in the past. And we feel like that's a critical part of any solution to the persistently impoverished areas that overlay Indian country.
And what do you see as the greatest barrier to tribal citizens thriving in the agriculture sector?
You know, Indian agriculture and ag finance is bigger than just the actual finance that's happening in the ag sector. Our people are paying 4 to 5% more in interest for their regular money. We've got banks in our communities that are charging 16, 17% for secured credit. So that is also pushing down on our Indian producers, because if they want to go finance a washing machine or a vehicle that'll get them the 120 miles a day they need to drive to get to and from their off-farm employment, that cost of money has to be made up somewhere. And it's going to come out of their ag operation. The truth of the matter is, an Indian can mortgage its individually held trust land in a way that makes a lender 100% secure. Lenders choose not to do that, or if they do it, they discount that real estate in value so that the producer can't get the proper amount of capital that he needs, and he can never get it on terms that are comfortable, where a non-Indian can go and do a 30-year mortgage on their real estate, and the bank does it regularly and gives them the interest rate that is tied to that security. Indian producers generally don't enjoy that luxury. The biggest barrier at this point in time to Indian country flourishing and turning from ag economies to food economies is a lack of affordable capital through financing vehicles. And that's a problem that's becoming more prevalent nationwide, not just in Indian country. We're seeing farm debt go up 4% a year since 1994. We've got suicide hotlines cropping up all across the country for farmers and ranchers. There's something that we feel is inherently broken in the ag finance system. And I think it's the fact that ag finance currently serves finance, not ag.
And what's the solution?
We've got an idea to change all of that, to treat our agribusiness partners as just that, partners, not as people who we want to loan money to and try to recover our loan funds as quick as possible. We're looking to invest through our CDFI, which is a community development financial institution, invest in our partners in Indian country that are in ag and food production, and help them keep the capital on their side of the ledger and pay us a return on investment. Treat our Indian producers like the business opportunity that they are. Now, that where tribes are having success in spite of this landscape, it's commitment from tribal leadership to focus on this as an issue, which is challenging because tribes all across the country have so many issues that they need to be focusing on. And turning into a food economy is kind of a one-off or two-off solution. It's a few years out before you can do it. Going out and building that casino or entering into that 8A contract is a little more short-term. But we have to wrap our minds around the fact that we've got over 50 million acres of land. Over 45 million of it is in ag production or capable of ag production. And until we really focus our attention on addressing that and improving that, we're still going to struggle with access to capital.
Despite these challenges, tribes bring many innovative approaches to agriculture. Can you give us an example of this?
We're realizing that European agriculture doesn't work on the North American continent. And the things that we're talking about, pasture to plate, sustainable grazing, regenerative agriculture, those aren't innovations. Mm-hmm. Those are returning to what was going on this continent in 1491. The drone technology is observational research based on a visual appraisal, which is what our people did generation over generation over generation. So we figured out how to process a vanilla bean. The multi-step process to get vanilla from a vanilla bean is still the same as it was when it was discovered in South America centuries ago. So I think there's a burgeoning awareness, if you will, of maybe they were doing it right here, and we should have just looked at enhancing that instead of trying to bring wheat over here or try to turn this into tobacco plantations. That's where we're at with agriculture from the Indian perspective.
And the Council's professional development and youth programs ensure this knowledge is carried on to future generations.
I'm pretty fond of picking on folks that have an education because I'm a dropout myself. I came home to ranch and kind of thought this was a good place to raise my family instead of finishing up college and going on to be a lawyer like I started off to be. But I get to the I'll get in a meeting and there'll be some PhDs and some masters in biology, and I'll just do a poll. I'll say, how many of you are this, how many of you are that? And usually it's folks in the ag or food field, and I say, congratulations, you have achieved at this point in your life what every 13-year-old native on this continent knew in 1491, because our kids knew all of this. We knew what foods were medicine. We knew what foods were poison. We knew why that food in particular would clot your blood as opposed to that one, which was an antihistamine. And our kids knew that at a very early age. So our whole youth program is built to realize that and understand that we've got to be bringing that next generation along so that they know the things that we know. So if disease should take this generation out that I happen to be part of, the next generation already knows. And we really want to embrace the opportunity that we have with technology like podcasts or YouTube videos or things like that to help our youth realize the storytelling model of conveying research from one generation to the next is absolutely valuable. And your people were doing it right. Now we have the technology to make sure that we can preserve this for generations as far out as we can have electricity and electrons. So from our youth development in the last, about 10 years, we've made a focused effort at helping our youth realize there is more to agriculture than just literally working in the dirt. We need biologists. We need graphic designers. We need folks that like to work with numbers. We need folks that like to do research on animal behavior. All of these things contribute to your reservation's agriculture economy.
Thank you, Zach. To learn more about the Intertribal Agriculture Council, visit IndianAgLink.com. Let's talk about agriculture as a method for tribes to gain self-sufficiency. The Quapaw, or Agapa tribe, are the downstream people, or downstream of the Mississippi River. In 1834, the tribe was forcibly relocated to a reservation in Indian Territory. Today, the tribe is headquartered in Quapaw, Oklahoma, and is engaged in a number of enterprises, including gaming, hospitality, realty, and, critically, commercial agriculture and cattle operations. Here with me now is Chris Roper with the Quapaw Services Authority. Chris, I understand you run a true pasture-to-plate operation. What type of animals do you raise?
We raise several Angus cattle and American bison. We also source pork from local farmers and produce the local pork at our processing plant, and we can retail all of those products in our stores. We use those products in our restaurants, and we use those products in our daycares and elder centers. So we're able to control all the production of those products from start to finish.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the operation, which sounds pretty extensive, what was the impetus? I understand you started with bison, which I believe are a traditional food.
We did, yes. They are a traditional food for Native Americans. We started with the bison in 2010, and those were some of the first animals we brought back to tribal lands. Those animals were important culturally, and once we got those animals established back on the lands, we started working with outside entities such as the Intertribal Bison Council to be able to train some of our people to take care of the animals, and to also source other animals that we could bring back to our lands. And that eventually led us to being able to process those animals and use them for cultural meals in our elder centers, at our daycares, and for our cultural events. So it's been very important to our tribe to be able to have those animals here.
What's the extent of the operation today?
Today we have several different operations. We have The bison that started in 2010. We have the greenhouses that we started in 2013, and we have about 6 of those greenhouses now, as well as numerous raised gardens that we can grow various vegetables, herbs, and flowers. We have about 2,000 acres of row crops that we can grow various crops like corn, wheat, soybeans, and canola. We're able to use some of those products for animal feeds so that we can feed animals our own products and finish those animals and before they're processed. We have our coffee roasting facility that started in 2014. Of course, our processing plant that started in 2017. We have our beehives that we've been continually growing for the last several years, and we have about 100 beehives as well currently. We have several different operations that we're able to use all of these food products in, as well as retail. One of our newest ventures will open in May of this year. Will be our new farmers market that we're able to sell products and offer various products to our community and our tribe members at a reduced cost, so that it'll help them with food security issues that we've identified in our area. We have an animal feeding facility that we're able to feed animals and control the diets of those animals, and we can actually do that for outside customers as well. But craft beer, I did forget that, but the craft beer started in 2017, and we've been able to do 4 different brews, and as we expand our operations into Arkansas, we're going to increase that craft beer production as well.
The Quapaw tribe is also expanding its food production enterprise far beyond the reservation to international customers. Could you tell us a bit about that?
We have numerous inquiries constantly from overseas in regards to our coffee, beef sticks, beef jerky, as well as fresh meats. We have sent samples to Iran, Dubai, Hong Kong, China, South America, just all over the world, and gotten feedback from other groups and organizations that want to do business with us on, different packaging requirements. We've sent our people to some export training. We sent our coffee roasting manager to Japan this year to a food show, and he was able to market our coffee products in Japan. We're looking to keep expanding to overseas markets as opportunities arise, but we're actively seeking those opportunities and working with other distributors right now.
Now, as you've grown and expanded, what lessons learned have you picked up along the way?
Absolutely. There are lots of lessons learned and lots of growing pains. Even since we started, we have, started in agriculture back in 2010. We've had to learn and train people. Staffing has probably been one of our issues. That as you grow different entities and operations, you have to have people that can manage those. And in agriculture, some of the things that we do, it's hard to find people that know how to do that locally. So we end up having to find people that have good personalities, have good work ethics, and then we train them to do particular jobs and to manage different businesses that we have. So, one of our biggest growing pains is staffing itself and finding good people that can run the operations. But once we find those people and identify them, it's just phenomenal to watch the growth occur. Yeah, each entity has its own bit of red tape. The processing plant was probably one of the most challenging in dealing with USDA. We wanted that to be a federally inspected facility so that those meat products could travel across state lines and ultimately even overseas. In order to do that, you have to work with USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service, and that plant has to be inspected continually by that group. That plant was assigned a facility number, and we have a full-time federal inspector in that facility every day of the week. We also have worked with USDA Ag Marketing Service, and we took a tribe member with a cooperative agreement with AMS and had one of our tribe members trained as a USDA meat grader. So that tribe member was able to have his own USDA stamp, and he can grade meat in our facility, and that grading stamp can stay with that product wherever it goes. We have adopted our own food codes as well. So as a tribal nation, we have a set of food codes that we abide by. But as each individual operation, we've had to develop some food codes similar to the processing plant. That we had to develop a set of codes that would pass federal regulations through Food Safety Inspection Service, and that we could adopt and follow on a daily basis. So that's been an interesting one. The coffee facility has a set of regulations that it goes by. Anything in food production is very strictly regulated and has a set of codes that we have to follow.
In addition to finding good people, what advice do you have for tribes looking to succeed in food production?
We work with tribes all over the United States, and we're happy to share what we've learned, both good and bad. I thoroughly recommend everybody to do their homework. Meat production is a challenging business. Row crops, the coffee, honey production, they all have their own challenges. Greenhouses are very interesting and very rewarding to watch the plants grow and provide food to the various entities that we have. But the meat production has been probably the most challenging of all the things that we've tackled, just really based on knowing where that product goes and controlling the quality along the way. You absolutely have to know where that product is going to end up before you process that animal, so that you can get it packaged right, labeled right, cut right. A lot of challenges in meat production. We do work with several tribes across the United States on various agricultural operations in different capacities. Some of them we're helping develop floor plans, we're helping work through regulations, we're sharing consultant information with them. So we work with a lot of tribes in various capacities.
And what have these ventures, these very successful ventures, meant for the tribes itself beyond the economic benefits?
Culturally speaking, it's been very important to get the tribe back to its roots, getting tribe members back to growing their own food, being able to grow and produce products that we can be proud of and know where they came from. Controlling quality of coffee and meat and vegetables and herbs has been phenomenal. It's actually changed the meals in our restaurants. It's changed the meals in our elder center and our daycares. And even in our restaurants at our casinos and hotels, we've been able to improve the food quality because the freshness of the food is so phenomenal. Our customers recognize the difference in food that they're eating, and they keep coming back to experience that again and again.
Thank you, Chris. To learn more about the Quapaw Tribe's food production enterprise, visit quapawtribe.com. You can also check out a documentary on the Quapaw on Amazon Prime. Where else? Pride of the Agapa. The Cherokee Nation is the largest tribal nation with more than 360,000 tribal citizens. The nation manages a number of businesses with significant economic impact and initiated several cultural and environmental programs. We're here today with a modern-day Indiana Jones, the Environmental Resources Senior Director with the Cherokee Nation, Pat Gwin. When I first caught up with Pat, he was preparing feathers from an eagle already deceased from natural causes, I want to reassure our listeners, for use in a ceremony honoring outgoing tribal council members. Pat, I have to ask, what's an average day for you like? What hats do you wear?
Well, thank you, Ms. Harris. I wear, I guess, a lot of hats. The average day starts at 6 and ends about the same time, 12 hours later. But I have been with the tribe for going on 30 years now, I guess, and I have some administrative duties that I have to do, keeping track of a couple of employees, of course, those administrative things that no one likes to do, particularly those with a science background, I guess. But the main thing is that I have to assure that our hundreds of species of plants and crops that we have down in the seed bank, garden, and native plant site are healthy and thriving, so I can make sure that I get our citizens the plant materials they either need and or request when we open up the seed bank.
Before we get started, could you define for our listeners what precisely a seed bank is?
Well, I'm assuming that it can mean a little, different things to different folks, but at the end of the day, a bank is an institution in which you place items of value therein, and when you need to withdraw, they're held safely therein, and when you need to withdraw them, you can go to that facility and take them out, and that's exactly what this is. Every year, the Cherokee Nation grows, tens of thousands of seeds from various plants. We grow during the spring and summer. We harvest and prepare and store in the fall and winter, and then every February we retrieve those or withdraw those from the bank. Everything but two sets of genetics that we want to keep. One set of genetics we will plant the following year, and another set of genetics which is held in a different location in case there's some type of catastrophe. We do live in tornado country here in Oklahoma, and then the process starts all over. We distribute the excess seeds, and our genetics start the process over again for another year.
Could you share with us the story behind the seed bank? Because this was a big project requiring extensive research and even travel across the country. What was the impetus?
Yeah, well, I can. It was in roughly 2005, late 2005. There was a Natural Resources Committee of the Council. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault was going online, and it was the story of the day in a lot of publications. The council members really thought that was an interesting endeavor, and they wanted to get some of our Cherokee seeds placed into the global vault. And I, at that point in time, was just a simple mere employee. I certainly wasn't management or anything like that, and I was actually there at the meeting, as a substitute, a proxy, and told them that I didn't know if we had any plans to do so, but could certainly look into that. To which they, requested / demanded that I do exactly that. Come up with a list of heirlooms that the Cherokee Nation had and that our citizens had, and get those placed into the seed vault. Of course, our meetings are monthly. Spent the next month doing some research, and the outcome of the research was not good. We did not have the Cherokee Nation, nor were any of the citizens that we knew of our Cherokee citizens that we knew of, actually maintaining those crops from our past. And I don't mean just a few, I mean zero. We could find none. And when I reported that back to the council, it was at that point in time that it was determined that we had a cultural crisis ongoing, and that crisis was going to receive an awful lot of attention and was going to be rectified.
And you make a very important point, because this isn't just about agriculture. This is about a loss of culture over time. And this might even relate to the Cherokee language, which I understand is a language of metaphor and description. Is that correct?
Well, and remember, I'm a nerd, so I generally use the term agronomy when I'm growing our things, and I use the term agriculture when I'm talking about the tribal aspect, because you can't have culture. I mean, you can't have. Agriculture is the nexus of agronomy and culture, and the Cherokee language. We're just like any other indigenous North American tribe that we have issues with our language now. The United States is a predominantly English-speaking entity, and as our citizens pass and new citizens replace them, Cherokee is a language that's spoken less and less. The loss of a Cherokee name or Cherokee phraseology and the loss of a plant are in actuality the same thing. So once the name is lost, the plant is somewhat lost as well, because the usage and or the pertinent Cherokee description thereof is lost. And there's no time machine to go back and get those things.
I understand you took an extensive journey over 2 years to reclaim a significant part of that heritage for the seed bank. Could you take us along part of that journey?
Well, it didn't take 2 years. I don't know how long it's going to take because it's still ongoing. But in that 2005 time period, we did commence a pretty rigorous search going back to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, EBCI, and then going to various scholars, some of our governmental entities, and even a few museums to look at a few, Cherokee cultural items that we thought may contain seed. We were able to get a few varieties of beans from our Cherokee brothers back east, the Eastern Band. A person's name whom I have to mention is Carl Barnes. He's well known in the corn circles. He's probably had more types of corn than any human being on the planet. At the point in 2005-ish, he actually resided in the Panhandle of Oklahoma. We were able to get a few varieties of corn from him.
Now, you made a surprising find. A traditional Cherokee cultural pouch. It had tobacco seeds in it, right?
It had 12 seeds in the pouch. And if you talk, you have to understand that a tobacco seed is way smaller than a grain of finely ground coffee. So tiny items. We were able to procure 3 of the seeds from that pouch, and that's the start of our tobacco that we grow today. By the gallons to distribute to our citizens. We continue to work, and we've gone from no seed bank to now a seed bank that has, as I said, well over 100 species therein.
Any Cherokee citizen can request seeds. What's required of tribal citizens who request seeds or plants? For example, there's no charge, right?
Remember, this is first and foremost a cultural endeavor, and these plants belong to the Cherokees. They don't belong to the Cherokee Nation, and they certainly don't belong to me or any component thereof. They are considered the property of Cherokee people. So to charge money for those would be a dishonor to both Cherokee in general and to our ancestors. So it's free of charge. Don't ask me how they do it. The website's really advanced, and it can determine enrollment in the Cherokee Nation quite easily, and immediately it's all done automatically. And for the other 2 tribes, they just simply provide us a copy of their tribal registration.
Now, because you're really breaking ground in this, if you'll forgive the pun, do you have any lessons learned that you'd like to share with other tribes thinking about recovering their own heirloom crops?
Well, I come from a different era. I'm on the downhill side of life at this point in time, so I've seen more than a lot of folks. But my father was he was a very democratic person, and from a very young age, he informed us that me and my brother that we did not have to work the garden if we didn't want to. Working the garden was strictly voluntary. However, if you didn't work the garden, you weren't welcome at the dinner table. So that sort of necessitated the need to develop an interest in gardening and horticulture pretty quick. And also doing a lot of things out in nature, he would request certain things, and he didn't have a lot of patience. So if you brought him the wrong thing, you did not want to misidentify a particular species of plant, because that was not going to be a good day for either of you. So as I said, I developed an interest in this by necessity, way before 5, and was doing this. So I think that the most important thing is for people to rekindle that interest that lies innately within not just Cherokees, but within all humans. I've met very few humans that don't eat. And I think it's one of the sins of our day that people do not know where their food comes from. It's amazing to me when I have students come to the garden site, and they just have they have zero comprehension of exactly how food gets onto their table. And I think that if we were to rectify that particular equation, I think that we would not be suffering from this truly abhorrent ill we have in society today of the food waste we have. I can assure you no food goes to waste in my house. And I think if you would check with folks that have a lot of dirt under their fingernails, you'll see they don't waste food either, because gardening is about 5% smarts, it's about 4% art, and it's about 91% sweat, because gardening is hard work. We talked about in 2005 this fall about global seed vault. And just a few days ago, I was on the phone with their director of science, and the Cherokee Nation is in the process of getting some of our heirloom crops into that particular vault as we speak. So it's gone full circle.
Thank you, Pat. To learn more about the Cherokee Nation Seed Bank, visit webapps.cherokee.org/seedbank. Now, we are, after all, the Environmental Law Institute, so let's put this all into the context of the law. And what significant law should we talk about as part of this program other than the Farm Bill? For that, we have with us Colby Duren, Director of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at the University of Arkansas. Colby, could you first tell us a bit about the initiative and the work you do where federal Indian law and agriculture law intersects?
We've been around for 6 years. We were really founded and centered around trying to be able to help support tribal governments, tribal food producers, and food businesses, and build healthy food systems, help support tribal sovereignty, and really be able to do this through looking at strategic legal analysis, policy research, and providing educational resources, all focusing on empowering Indian country, being able to kind of really put tribal sovereignty into the food sovereignty movement, and doing so looking at a way of building it through sustainable food and agriculture economic development. For our listeners, could you give us the 30,000-foot overview of the Farm Bill? Will you take that challenge? Yes, I will. It's always fun to take a larger look at such a substantial yet in the weeds bill. The Farm Bill is something that Congress passes every 5 years. It's actually been around in sort of its current form since about the mid-1930s. And what it does is it sets out the policies and programs and the funding for a majority of the USDA's Department of Agriculture of their program areas. And so the bill itself has 12 different titles. I won't name all of them, but it goes through different components of it, looking at commodities in agriculture. Conservation is a very large part of it. The nutrition title is probably the largest title of it, which has about 70% of the funding, about 74% of the funding in the most current version of the Farm Bill. but it does also work in helping support build infrastructure in rural areas. There's a large forestry component of it as well too. So it touches so many different areas and programmatic components. And I should also say it provides funding for research and agriculture, funding for land grant institutions and other educational opportunities as well too. So this bill looks basically, it's done every 5 years, and there's a little bit of a trigger switch in there that forces Congress to actually act about every 5 years. This was one of the very first farm bills they've done on time. They haven't done one on time, I think, in about the last previous 6. They usually just extend the law out and then continue negotiations of it. But why it's important for Congress to take a look about every 5 years is that the realities within food and agriculture change pretty often. That can be based on different impacts to climate, different impacts to market forces, different impacts to other components, to trade. And so it's important to have a continually updated set of laws and programs that really help respond to the realities of farmers and food producers on the ground, so that they're not getting too far ahead, and that they have the sort of the support and the programs match what they need to be able to help them sustain and thrive their production and businesses.
Clearly, this is a very complex piece of legislation, and we really appreciate your breaking it down. Which provisions can we point out as particularly significant for tribes?
There are certainly some ones that have a fairly substantial impact. I think the first one to mention would be the nutrition title. As I said earlier, the nutrition title has a majority of the funding. It's actually about 76% of the funding of the whole bill. And just to give a scope and size of that, the 5-year spending of this currently passed farm bill is $428 billion. It's one of the largest non-defense spending bills that Congress passes. So you're looking at over 3/4 of that is fully focused on nutrition, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, or the renamed Food Stamps Program. It also includes the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations, or FDIPR, or the Commodities Program, which represents a very small sliver of that 76% of spending. What we do know from some of the statistics is about 24% of American Indian and Alaska Native households receive SNAP, and about 25% of Native Americans overall receive some type of federal food assistance. So we know that the nutrition programs have a substantial and important impact throughout the entirety of Indian country. Tribes also run and manage the FDIPR program as well. So that's an important component of tribal self-governance and providing programs and services directly to tribal citizens that can be responsive to their specific realities on the ground as well. So the nutrition title is a very important component. I would also say the conservation title is one that has a great amount of interest too as well. I think just with a lot of times getting into other USDA programs, conservation is usually the key to try to get into that. Particularly sometimes you have to be in some type of conservation program or plan to get into crop insurance or some other commodity programs. So having conservation focus is important. There are a lot of tribes and tribal producers that use the conservation programs like CSP and EQIP. So that title is very important as well. Forestry garnered a lot of interest as well too. There's over 300 tribes that have different forestry lands or woodlands as well. So there's a lot of interest in looking at trying to be able to have support to help provide healthy forest management practices throughout the bill. I would also say, in addition to that, credit is something that garnered a good amount of interest as well too, in trying to be able to help support credit access to native producers. Rural development title also is important. One of the things in the rural development title that really sticks out is that you can build so much just baseline basic infrastructure, all the way from roads to the wires that go down to connect the electricity, to broadband, the water, housing, the community centers, buildings, schools, using all of rural development's authorities. And that authority is really focused on rural areas where you have a lot of tribal governments located. So being able to help improve access to some of those programs can really help build strong tribal communities and strong rural communities as well too. And there's a lot of interest also in the horticulture title too, with the changes to legalize the production of industrial hemp. And there's a provision there that allows for the for tribal plans for that as well. So I'd say those are probably some of the larger ones throughout, but there are a lot of interest in garnered throughout the entirety of the bill. And I think that's just sort of a reality of how USDA works, where there are these kind of set buckets, but they all sort of are interwoven together and can work together.
Clearly, the Farm Bill has significant impact for quality of life and food security in Indian country in general, with provisions that are particularly relevant to any tribe or tribal citizen involved in food production. Now, you work closely with the Native Farm Bill Coalition, which was founded in October 2017 on the current iteration of the Farm Bill. For our listeners, the ball on this effort started rolling in early 2017 with the Shakopee Metawakanton Sioux community in Minnesota, which was looking at potential changes in federal law that could help support tribal self-governance, food sovereignty, and healthy and traditional foods. The Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative developed a report that walked through the earlier version of the Farm Bill, looking at opportunities for tribes in the 2018 version. Over 170 tribes were involved with or represented the effort, along with several intertribal organizations, including the Intertribal Agriculture Council, the National Congress of American Indians, and the Intertribal Timber Council, and a number of allied organizations.
That effort and that founding, I think, really put together a large group, and it was one of the largest. It was the largest group of tribal governments, tribal leaders, and tribal organizations coming together, really to speak with one voice and talk about what are some of the changes in the Farm Bill that can really help build infrastructure, build economic development, and at the end of the day, ultimately feed people and provide jobs and opportunities throughout Indian country. And what that ended up doing was culminating when the final bill was signed into law, was including 63 tribal-specific provisions throughout 11 of the 12 titles of the Farm Bill.
Where did you and the coalition put a lot of focus?
A lot of the requests that were put forward by the tribes and tribal organizations from the Native Farm Bill Coalition really focused on supporting tribal government sovereignty and also tribal government parity, and also parity for tribal producers and programs. And so some of that was, when we're looking at the scope of food and agriculture law, while there is the large federal Farm Bill, a good amount of that and a good amount of food and agriculture gets regulated on the local level. So there are a lot of deferences to state law, local law, other authorities within the bill. So trying to ensure that when there were those types of deferences, that tribal governments and tribal laws were included in that. And also where there were places where states were running programs, that tribal governments would have the ability to be able to run those programs for their citizens as well. Some of that was looked at to do that, as you'd mentioned, looking at what's a tribal self-governance or 638 contracting, which comes out of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act of 1975. And it's a recognition of tribal governments stepping into the role of the federal government to run and manage programs that impact their citizens and impact folks throughout Indian country. And so that's been just limited to Indian Health Service, providing healthcare services, Department of Interior programs and Bureau of Indian Affairs programs as well, for about almost 47 years now. And they've been an incredibly successful component of it. So when we're looking at trying to be able to help improve and expand tribal self-governance and trying to have that recognized authority at USDA, that was some of the larger asks, and trying to say and take a look at what different programs should USDA now have that delegated authority to enter into these type of tribal self-governance contracts and compacts. One thing that was important throughout here was looking at ways to be able to help support Native producers and traditional foods. Part of that is trying to improve access to credit and making changes into the credit system that can help further support tribal producers to have entry into that as well. And of course, looking at other ways to have inclusions of traditional foods and programs, particularly in the nutrition programs, that that serve tribal citizens. And so trying to have those type of foods have to be able to be included in those programs, to be able to help try to improve the ability for Native producers to go through the procurement process that's often required for federal programs as well.
Colby, what are you most excited about in the current iteration of the Farm Bill?
That's a great question. I think some of the more exciting components of it are the ones that focus on self-governance and inclusion of traditional foods. For the first time, this Farm Bill there's two provisions that provide that 638 Tribal Self-Governance Authority to USDA. The first one's in the nutrition title and is in the FDIPR program. And I should go back and say one of the largest asks, I think as you alluded to before, was to have tribal governments have the authority to run as many federal food assistance programs as possible. There was a larger request to have tribes have the authority to run and manage the SNAP program, which there was a bill introduced on the Senate side at one point that ultimately didn't get in. But one of the pieces that got in regarding 638 was for the FDIPR program that will allow for as a demonstration project FDIPR sites and multiple sites to enter into 638 federal government food procurement contracts where they'll be able to go out and source food for their specific programs. And I think what that will do is not one additional self-governance component in USDA for the first time, but it also really allows those sites to be able to say, these are the type of foods that we want to source for our citizens in the program. These are the traditional foods. These are the culturally appropriate foods that our folks want to have, and be able to go out to purchase those from Native producers to hopefully allow them to have a federal program to sell into without having to sell into the entirety of the FDIPR program, which you would have to now sell into if you wanted to be a producer. So it allows for more focused, regionally and culturally appropriate traditional foods in the program, and then also allows a pathway for Native producers to be able to sell into that program and to help build their capacity to grow and expand production and to help improve food access. There's a 638 self-governance contracting provision that allows for tribal governments to contract with Forest Service and also the Bureau of Land Management at the Department of Interior to manage adjacent federal forest lands that are adjacent to their tribal forest lands as well. And so this is a strong recognition of the ability of not only trying to help improve forest management and contracts, but doing so under the self-governance model. Forest Service does already do cooperative management agreements. So this is really that next step in being able to do so under a true self-governance model. And this can do something to really truly help improve the health of the whole forest systems as well, that allows tribes to help manage federal forests where the federal government may not have the ability or capacity to do so, or the full resources to do so. So now you're able to have healthier forest systems that are managed under a consistent management practice, which has been shown to do a lot of things, including lower some of the damages and impacts of fire and to help mitigate that risk, but also be able to help manage the risk of infestation and some other issues that happens, which is incredibly important now, as we're seeing every year is now the worst year for forestry fires. One of I'd like to call it like the largest, smallest change in the whole bill. In the conservation title, USDA has always had the authority to enter into what are called alternative funding arrangements with tribal governments to fund conservation practices like CSP and EQIP. That was always done under a may authority, so the secretaries had that authority. And this change in this bill actually changes that may to a shall. So what this is an important recognition of when tribal governments are looking to do conservation practices, or they're organized in ways that they've been engaged in for thousands of years, or entering into conservation or using conservation practices that are traditional, or they're coming to USDA and they might not look like other producers or other entities that USDA sees, that itself is not a barrier for tribes to access conservation programs and funding. And so under these alternative funding arrangements, now tribal governments will be able to take over and work with the federal government on what the management practices are, implement those, be able to manage the money, the reporting, and all the other components of it as well too, and to basically step into that role, which I think will be able to really help almost extend some of the capacity components of NRCS to build that out. So I think those are probably some of the three very exciting changes that we're seeing that will do a lot to really help support tribal government parity, tribal producer parity, and access to traditional foods, and also support support conservation practices and support healthy lands, healthy forests, healthy water, and healthy foods.
And before we go, Colby, what are some recent accomplishments and projects underway at the initiative that tribes already involved in or prospectively interested in food production can take advantage of?
We developed a model tribal food and agriculture code, which is 19 titles long. It's a free resource for tribal governments and to have access to, but it basically starts from anywhere from the creation of a Department of Agriculture to kind of be the regulatory entity or body, and then walks through water, conservation, agriculture, business practices, trade, economic development, and takes a strong look at basically almost if you're looking at beginning food and agriculture, any different part, or looking to be able to expand in some ways, what are maybe some steps as a particular government that you would like to be able to take in that? One, it's an important expression of tribal sovereignty, but it's also a way to be able to help set the parameters to help protect tribal producers in that process, to be able to say, these are the different components that are important to us that we want to have set in our laws. And so we're very excited about that project. We released the code in December 2018. That's something that's available online for tribal producers and tribal governments to have them and to hopefully be a starting point for this. And we're offering technical assistance on that as well.
I'm probably not you can tell me, am I the first person? I'm probably not to call it a Department of Agriculture in a box.
You are the first person, and it'd be great if we could have your permission to use something like that. That's a great way to describe it. It really is kind of meant to be that. It's supposed to be, really that baseline level, works that a tribal in-house council or their attorneys can take a look at it. There can be an analysis done on, okay, these are the different components that are important to what we're looking to do. These are the ways that we would tweak what the model law would look like. And then be able to pass it in a manner that incorporates what are some of the biggest components and protections that tribe would want to be able to have in place. I would also very highly recommend a lot of particularly producers and tribal governments, if they're looking for some very specific on the ground technical assistance, to reach out to the folks at Intertribal Agriculture Council. They have their technical assistance network in all throughout the entirety of the country. And there's a representative in each one of the Bureau of Indian Affairs regions as well too. And they can really help provide some of that on the ground technical assistance components as well. So I think that there's a lot of resources just kind of within a lot of the different groups and entities that we can provide and that we also work with as well too. There's also a lot of outreach at USDA. If you're looking at some of their support, there are some different changes to beginning, newer, and socially disadvantaged farmer programs. USDA is looking to implement those. As we know, the beginning farmer and rancher programs and socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher programs, which have existed for a little while, were actually combined and provided baseline funding for the very first time. So those programs have, I think it's $30 million between all of them. And so those are ways for beginning farmers and ranchers in Indian country to be able to take a look at what are some of the opportunities to help get support to have access for both being able to develop their production to getting into markets and looking at some of those other components.
Thank you, Colby. To learn more about the initiative, visit www.indigenousfoodandag.com. We hope to continue chatting with tribes and legal experts on energy development, about issues spanning climate change, water quality, and more. Until next time, this is Cynthia Harris with the Environmental Law Institute.
Thank you for tuning in to People, Places, Planet Pod, brought to you by the Environmental Law Institute. We would like to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and ideas to podcast@eli.org. And if you're interested in learning more about our work, attending one of our events, reading our publications, or becoming a member, please visit our website at www.eli.org.